taking care of me. A week had passed since the man had driven away from his uncle's home, but he was not as happy as he had hoped he would be. He had read over the notes he had taken during the important conversation with his uncle, but he found it was one thing to talk about taking 1 minute for myself. It was quite another thing to do it. The man simply hadn't done it. Maybe I don't believe it will work, he thought as he drove along in his car. Or maybe it just takes a little self discipline. Changing was more difficult than he had anticipated. The man had to admit he did not like to change, but he also knew that if he wanted to be happier, he was going to have to change something. He decided to read over his notes again and see what it was he would try to do. In the meantime, he turned off the radio and thought about what he had heard from his uncle. For some reason, he remembered that uncle had said that one of the things he did in his life was to simplify. Uncle had said that he kept reducing things to their most simple and basic truths. But the man believed that life was more complicated than that. He certainly saw his own life as difficult and complex, and so he had difficulty with this idea. However, since he was unable to reread his notes while he was still driving, he decided to try to recall the most simple and fundamental thing that his uncle was saying. He remembered the ideas of seeing the difference between what he wanted and what he needed, and between expecting the fantasy and enjoying the reality. And he remembered other things that seemed to be an important part of becoming happier, but they didn't seem so simple. What is the most simple idea I could use right away? He tried to recall. At the moment, he approached a stop sign. Then he smiled. He remembered what the simple idea was to stop and look and listen. Stop for 1 minute. Ask himself how he could take better care of himself. Listen to his own inner wisdom. That was something he could do now. The man saw that there was no one behind him, so he sat there for a full minute. He stopped and asked himself, what is the best way for me right now to take better care of me? He silently listened to himself as the man looked through the dirty windshield at the stop sign. He frowned. I've got to get this car washed someday, he thought. The man felt better when he was driving a clean car. In fact, a dirty, unorganized, uncontained car made the man feel a little that way himself, though most of the time he wasn't aware of it, but he felt he was just too busy to take the time to get it washed. The man realized that he had been meaning to get the car washed for some time, or at least to put some fluid in the windshield washer. Usually he thought he had other things to do, so he ignored it. But he wound up looking at a dirty view and feeling that he hadn't done what would have made it happier. The man looked out through his dirty windshield, so it was safe to proceed, and drove away from the stop sign. He already knew what he was going to do. He just wondered why he hadn't done it earlier. He took the time to drive to a gas station with the car wash, get the car washed, and have the windshield washer filled. He called his wife to let her know that what he was doing and that he would be a little late. What he offered to pay with his major credit card, he found it was not acceptable. The attendant was firm about it. He wanted cash. In the past, something like this at the end of a long work day would have annoyed him, but he was feeling good. He was glad he had taken the time to do something for himself. And the car gleamed. They had done a good job. The man smiled, paid in cash, and drove away. The man thought, it's amazing how a small thing like cleaning my car can make a big difference. He looked out his clean windshield and smiled. I see the world differently when I take better care of myself. The man usually came home feeling the stress of work. He had have a drink and watch TV. That night, however, he decided to read a book about a simple relaxation technique to reduce stress. He had gotten out of the habit of reading, and so he read only a part of the book. Then he watched television with his wife and children. It was relaxing but boring. The next night, however, he finished the book. At first, he was disappointed because it described a very simple technique indeed. He wondered if it would work. But a few nights later, he found a quiet place and sat in a chair with both feet on the floor and his eyes closed. He breathed in and out deeply and slowly. Then, in his mind, he quietly repeated the word one over and over again. He tried to think of nothing else but the word one. He could feel himself relaxing. When other thoughts came into the man's mind, he just gently replaced these distracting thoughts by easily repeating the word one in his mind. He did this for about 20 minutes. At first, he didn't see much wonderful results, but he repeated this simple relaxation method each morning before he went to work and again each evening. Then something happened. He didn't know what it happened, but he realized at some point that he had become more relaxed. He had far less tension in his neck, shoulders. The man felt less stress. He reread the parts of the book again. The more he studied and used the relaxing method, the less stress he felt and the more peaceful he became. He decided to continue to use the relaxing technique. The following week, the man left for a multiple business trip because it was an important trip. He was accompanied by two of his business associates. The following week, the man left for a multiple business trip because it was an important trip. He was accompanied by two of his business associates. The flight from Boston was delayed. They were scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles at 9 p.m., midnight Boston time. But the plane was 2 hours late departing. He and others thought they would arrive at 2 a.m. their time. They all knew about the important meeting earlier the next morning, so each was anxious to get into his hotel room and get some rest. But the West Coast airport was fogged in. As they descended, the man felt the plane suddenly lift back up into the air. They later learned that this was done to avoid another airplane in the fog. He and the others were told they were going to have to land in San Diego, over 100 miles away. They would then have to take a 3-hour bus ride to their hotel. They would be lucky to be in their beds at all before the important meeting. The man felt exhausted. Then he did something to take better care of himself. Riding in the bus, he had been angrily thinking about what had happened. If the plane had left on time, maybe he would have arrived before the fog set in. Or maybe they could have landed in the fog or avoided the long bus ride. The man felt the fatigue. He thought he would never be able to do well in the meeting, feeling so tired. He didn't feel exactly nurtured. Far from it. Then he stopped for a minute and asked himself if there was a better way for him to nurture himself. There was little he could do about the circumstances, so he looked at what he could control, his thinking. He knew the loss of time was annoying him, so the man chose to see his circumstances differently. He saw himself not wasting time on the bus. He saw himself instead in the plane crash that could have happened in the dangerous fog, and the man soon figured out that an airplane crash would have taken up a whole lot more than just his time. Pretty soon he was delighted to be riding along in a nice, comfortable bus. It was at that moment, riding on a bus at night in Southern California, that he realized what Uncle had been talking about. There was something the man could do in just 1 minute, something that could change everything.